Who asked you with WipeTech? No one. This isn't a just asking questions with WipeTech, but someone brought up something called Randonautica. This is an exploration app or methodology that breaks people out of their predetermined realities or gets them out of their ruts. I'll be doing that in a minute. But if you have 11 million users being sent to pseudo randomized locations, coordinates, GPSs, with that number, a few will be disturbing places. Now, I'm saying that a specific way for a simple reason. A real random number generator with two people operating it, it doesn't matter how big you think that the odds are against something happening. The likelihood of two users ending up at the same location using this or getting the same random number from a random number generator can't be zero unless it's pseudo-random. The company has to tell you whether or not it's pseudo-random or not. They also have to determine, are these locations that are physically reachable? What are the constraints, limits? They include statements like don't go onto private property. Look for they should include go for the quickest route because that one will give you an idea of whether you're trespassing or not. And this isn't the first time this has happened. It isn't. If you're not aware of it, throwing a dart at a map was a product you could get, but it was somewhat different than you might think. The not website, but the company you could buy it from, this is back in the old days of self-addressed envelopes. You'd send in your location on Earth, the range you were willing to travel that would make it casual. And they would send you a map of the area. If you said the world, they would send you what could be a compacted world map. Basically, it would make a Pangea map out of today's coastlines and cut out the pieces where you can't go, where they're inaccessible, impossible, or are heavily populated, which means Portland, Oregon would just disappear. Pieces of the map would disappear. And you get a really big map that was tiled repeatedly and very large. And the idea is that you would throw a dart at it and it give you generalized coordinates of where each of those places are. Again, it would omit areas that were heavily populated, omit areas that were not accessible. It would eliminate the ocean entirely and any large body of water like the Great Lakes. So they would have pinch points and very heavy distortions. And it had lines drawn on it so you could get the GPS data, basically. And from that, if it was in your area, you wouldn't have these kind of things going on. You would get another map that would be much more focused on it, and that would be your location to pick. If you did the entire worldwide method, the idea is you'd go to that location someday by any means necessary. The idea is that if you threw a dart at a grid of maps, the likelihood of you hitting dead center and never going outside of that central point would be nearly zero. And that's kind of the point. That's how much you'd have to randomize it. This is the equivalent in the program, if it's pseudo-random, to everybody throwing a dart out of 11 million users or whatever it is today. 11 million darts are dropped, and the dart picks up your location, and you pull out your dart, or your dart's sent back to you, and you're given the location for whatever size map you're doing. The constraints, limitations, and geofencing or whatever you want to call it, for Randonautica could be completely unrelated to this conversation because, like I said, this isn't the first time this has been done. This idea has existed from time immemorial, throwing a dart at a map. So, what's your range? What's your constraints? That sort of thing. Obviously, if you base it on where you can go in a weekend comfortably, it's going to focus on roads, highways, not dirt roads, the sands of the desert, hiking a mountain trail. But if it was written correctly, it could accommodate for how much you'd have to move, your age, your mobility level. There should be a whole questionnaire, which means it would have a full profile on how mobile you really are. Coincidentally, I invoked this same kind of concept when I explained to people, if you're going to do a bug out, whether it's a bug out location, vehicle, bag, and get home or get out bag, you have to know where your limits are. You have to know that if you live in Eastern Oregon, you're going to be stuck to roads. If you're escaping a nuclear bomb threat, a warning, if you get one, that bomb at the time would hit the nerve gas depot. So you'd drive away from the nerve gas depot. If you're worried about St. Helens or any of the other tall mountains that could be volcanic, there's only really Mount Hood, then you drive away from that mountain. If you're worried about flooding, you get the idea. They're all stacked up here. Pyroclastic flow, uh, storms, frogs, locusts. If you're worried about a tsunami, you need to know where the ocean is and get away from it and get to altitude. Altitude is your friend. These exact same constraint rules would or should apply to this. What I'm saying here is it's mostly a random generator, and they probably just give you a zone how many miles from your location, something simple like that. That also makes it to where you're less identifiable. Now let me review how to be safe on the internet. Do not give any large corporation or any piece of software your real identity data. And if somebody says it's mandatory, don't. Use a gift card to pay for things instead of your real credit card, for instance. Don't trust large corporations with containing or corralling your passwords. That means don't give Google all of your passwords like they want you to do. It's not necessarily that they're doing evil, although they do that all the time. It's that it's insanely stupid. Next, the hype about this providing disturbing places should be expected. In fact, they should have thought of that originally. If you throw a dart at a map and it hits a place no one has been to for many years, you're going to find things that people haven't seen in many years. That's the attraction. But that's also the repulsion, because that's exactly where somebody might make sure someone wearing cement shoes was tossed. You're going to find things that are disturbing. It could be anything from we saw something weird to we saw something we've never seen before, negative and positive, to seeing things that you didn't know existed in the real world. You could pick a spot and find out that it's a midden. A midden, if you're not aware, I'm pronouncing it badly, is where waste material from animals eating is left. It's left behind like nuts and berries, the husks. Some squirrels and some animals will make an entire pile directly underneath a place they eat. That means the entire ground is covered with a very specific collection of this. Places where people made arrowheads will have shard middens, or just a scrap pile of random flakes of obsidian or whatever. That's how you locate where they were. Well, animals do the same thing. Some animals develop a habit of dragging an animal they've killed to a certain spot, so you'll find a graveyard, an animal skeleton graveyard. Raccoons have a habit of making a communal toilet area. Well, you might click on a spot and find this massive stuff. So, the video will also include how to be safe with Randonautica. Carry a first aid kit. Ask the developers to let you limit it to areas that are well traveled, which kind of defeats the purpose. They don't have to put up the warnings. You should be able to do this as put your big boy and big girl pants on, or in my case, put on your big boy kilt. You're going to have to learn how to deal with reality. What people are seeing as disturbing places is just, that's the real world out there. You know, finding bodies on a coastline because people die at sea or were murdered, that happens. But you should have expected that. If you go to a place that hasn't been visited by human beings in a very long time, you're going to find a bunch of stuff that nobody knew was there and wouldn't know to get rid of or clean up or whatever. You might find something cool, like a buried treasure. You might find someone's stash that they're willing to shoot you over. The same thing happened when people did geocaching. They had to make a bunch of rules about doing geocaches to be extremely safe. So, I'm going to include a link below to Randonautica on the Wikipedia page only. And I'm going to include one more link for Geocacher's Safety Manual. I think that one will cover it, because you're not going to be going somewhere to be there forever. You're going to visit somewhere, take pictures, maybe leave a souvenir if you're stupid. I don't recommend it with Randonautica. And then go home. But just like, you know, there are geocaches that are put in places that are nearly impossible to get to. Some of them are on mountaintops. There's apparently one on top of Mount Everest or somewhere. Also, I should point out that places that you'll be visiting will be places where people have left very important memoirs, mementos, or, you know, they might have put a heart with them plus somebody else there. You might find all sorts of things. And those may be places that people did not want you to see these. You also might find people going somewhere and getting all the demons out of themselves emotionally or whatever, and might have written something on some cave wall. Be mindful. don't have to be respectful to the world around you if you don't wish to, although I recommend you do. But please understand that if you do throw a dart at a map and go someplace that potentially people have not been in a long time or ever in any real way that we can understand, that means that the area hasn't been made palatable to humans. That means that the warning labels are off. There's not going to be any, a railing next to a cliff or a proper pathway possibly. You should know that. I'm sure that, from what I've seen so far, it mostly limits people to places that other people go to, so it should keep these problems to a minimum. But this is not, as the people who did this product say, influenced by your thoughts. I'm going to now say something that'll piss people off at the 10-minute, 45-second mark. You do not have the ability to influence things by having thinking about it, but power of positive thinking. Those are lies. They're not mistakes. They're not wishful thinking. It's lying, because this has been tested to death, and especially with a computer. Now, if your cell phone is sensing things about your patterns of behavior, if it's data mining your cell phone, it can probably pick some things based on what you are thinking or doing, and maybe trying to sell you something accidentally by getting some more spam. That would be the only way this can happen. Maybe it's measuring your body temperature. You better hope it's only probing your hand. But other than that, no, it doesn't do any of those things. And anybody who invokes anything like that, I don't care if you are a person who wants to believe, if you see somebody doing something on the internet involving computers or a large corporation or an app, and they say something that appeals to your inner Earth Smother, your inner Wicca, whatever, they're exploiting your need to be validated. Don't do that. I'm not going to be nice about it. You are being manipulated. You're being herded. Don't ever forget that. And on that note, if anybody wants to tell me, does it send people sometimes to the same location to where they all show up at the same time? That would be an indication it's truly a random generator, which is a very bad idea. Again, it should be geofenced. It should be based on looking up map data. There are map data files that tell you pinpoints of where you can and cannot go. They're exclusion maps. There's geofencing for your drone. There's something like that for private property. It's mostly real estate brokers. Most of it's going to be outdated by the time you get a copy of it, but that could be used by the website to make sure that you don't get certain number combinations or locations, and it excludes certain areas. They should do that. That's going to be a lot of overhead, and they're not required to do it. You're required to do it. Look up your laws about trespassing and stuff. But again, I'll include below in the description a link directly to geocaching and anything else I can find for safety and best practices. It's best practices, not what you can get away with. Remember that. And yes, I hope it's pseudo-random, because if it isn't, it's going to be a real mess. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.